I need you to prepare yourself for the best grilled cheese of your entire life. This grilled cheese is made with Jim Lahey's No Knead bread, homemade jammy caramelized onions, a homemade aioli, some fresh mozzarella, and prosciutto. And then it's pan fried in butter. So it's crunchy crunch crunch and jammy delicious sweetness. So strap yourselves in and let's do this together. Let's get started. So we're starting off with a homemade batch of Jim Lahey's No Knead bread, which is super, super delicious, bubbly, amazing. But this batch right here has been proofing for about 20 hours. So I'm just flouring a surface area, and I'm taking the Jim Lahey bread out of the bowl, and I'm going to fold it on top of itself a couple of times and then let it rise for another 2 hours. And you also want to be careful to not work with the dough too much, because you want to keep all of those delicious, delicate little bubbles intact. So be gentle with the dough when you take it out of the bowl, and also when you're working with it and getting it ready for its second rise. Next, we're moving on to one of my favorite things in the entire world, jammy caramelized onions. And right here I have 3 large sweet onions that I'm just removing the outer layer, and we are going to slice these up in a Cuisinart. So to cut these caramelized onions, to slice all these onions up, I am going to use a Cuisinart. So this is a lot quicker than slicing them all up yourself. So I'm going to use the slicing attachment. Put this in here in the Cuisinart. And now I'll slice 3 giant onions a lot quicker. Three giant sliced onions in under a minute, maybe even under 30 seconds. For these caramelized onions, I am heating 4 tablespoons of salted butter and about a third of a cup of olive oil. I actually probably in this video used a little more than a third of a cup, but you only really need a third of a cup, or maybe even a quarter of a cup of olive oil. And I'm going to let that heat, and then I'm going to add these large sweet onions that I sliced up. And it takes a little while. It probably takes about 45 minutes, an hour, maybe even a little bit more than an hour to do caramelized onions properly, even though there are videos on the internet of quicker ways of doing caramelized onions, which maybe one of these days I will try. But I'm keeping it old school, and I'm doing it the classic low and slow way, which requires a lot of patience, but these onions come out pretty spectacularly. So if it isn't broke, you don't need to fix it. Am I right? So about 45 minutes prior to cooking the bread, I am putting a large pot with a lid in the oven to preheat with the oven at about 450 degrees. Now the dough is done with its final rise. It's been about 2 hours, and I've just removed the pot with the lid out of the oven, so it's nice and hot. I'm just flouring this lightly, and I'm placing this dough seam side up in the hot pan, and then I'm going to leave it covered. I'm going to put it in the oven for about 30 minutes. And these caramelized onions are done. So I am just stirring it one last time, and I'm going to turn off the heat and remove them from the heat. Now the bread has been in the oven for 30 minutes, so I'm just removing the lid, and I'm going to stick it back in the oven for another 15 minutes to 30 minutes, or just depending on how brown and golden you want the top of the bread to be. And I took this batch out at 15 minutes of uncovered cooking, and it provided a very nice crispy golden top. I've done a focaccia recipe that is a Jim Lahey recipe, and I've made this dough multiple times, and I've also done a pizza recipe on my YouTube channel, so I'll put those links below. But I'm a huge Jim Lahey fan. He is a genius, and I suggest trying all of his recipes. Is there anything more luxurious than homemade aioli? I think not, and it's also really easy to make. So for this $1 million sandwich, we're making our own homemade aioli, and I suggest you do the same. This sandwich is pure luxury deliciousness. Homemade caramelized super jammy onions, the thick Jim Lahey No Knead bread that is pan fried in butter, prosciutto, homemade aioli. The sandwich is $1 million sandwich. So good. It's the best grilled cheese I've ever had. I wouldn't call it a grilled cheese, I'd call it heaven between bread. It's too good. Like, too good.